If everyone is in debt, who do we owe? As of today, there is not a single country on earth that is debt-free. Even the United States has a debt that has exceeded $38 trillion. The European Union carries a debt of around $14 trillion. Japan's debt has nearly surpassed $9 trillion. And it's not only poor or economically fragile countries. Saudi Arabia, which tops the list in oil production, is also in debt. Export giants like Germany and China are in debt as well. In this situation, one naturally asks the question, if everyone is heavily in debt, who do we owe? It is precisely at this point that things become complicated, because the answer is not a single country, a single bank, or a single institution. In fact, the countries of the world are not indebted to any one entity. The world is indebted to itself. But not everyone benefits from this system in the same way. Today, total global debt has exceeded $315 trillion. This amount is nearly 3 times the size of the world economy. If we ask how we arrived at this point, we find the answer not in modern banking, but in wars. The idea of national debt emerged long before credit cards or digital currencies. In 1694, while England was at war with France, the gold in its treasury had run out. The king found the solution in borrowing from merchants. "Lend me money now," he said, "and I will pay you regular interest from the taxes I collect in the coming years." To manage this system, the Bank of England was established. This was truly a revolutionary move. The state could spend money it did not yet have. In return, lenders received something extremely valuable, a promise from the government that could be bought and sold. This is how government bonds came into existence. And in this way, the foundations of the modern financial system were laid. This model spread quickly. France adopted it. The Netherlands developed it further. America financed its independence and expansion through this system. Debt was no longer associated with failure. On the contrary, it was proof of credibility. If you could borrow, it meant you could govern. In the past, many empires conquered land for gold. Today, they issue bonds to earn interest. Battlefields have been replaced by balance sheets. By the time we reach the present day, debt has become the most widespread product on the planet. Every country is in debt. Every bank lends money. Every citizen is both a debtor and a creditor. So who is at the other end of this chain? Let's look at the United States, because its debt is not only national, but also global. About half of its $38 trillion in debt belongs to investors. But most of these investors are Americans themselves: banks, pension funds, insurance companies, and the U.S. Federal Reserve. These entities hold more than half of the debt. The remaining third is held by foreigners. The largest share belongs to Japan, followed by China. But China's share is only about 2% of the total debt. In other words, most of America's debt is actually owed to America itself. Americans pay taxes. Those taxes are used to pay interest on bonds. That interest flows back into pension funds. A self-contained, cyclical system. There is such a thing as debt, but the creditor is often the system itself. This cycle is not unique to America. Japan lends to America. America lends to Europe. Europe lends to developing countries. And they, in turn, invest back into Western bonds. Everyone holds someone else's debt, like a global game of hot potato. But this potato is not money. It is a promise. The real referees of this game are the markets. Giant funds, central banks, pension funds. They decide who gets cheap borrowing and who struggles to survive with high interest rates. And at the very center of the system are central banks. Central banks do not just manage debt, they also create it. When a central bank buys government bonds, it creates new money in return. So every unit of money in circulation corresponds to a debt somewhere. Do not imagine that there is such a thing as debt-free money. So why is this system still standing? Because there is trust in it. Investors do not expect governments to fully repay their debt. They only hope that interest will be paid and the debt will be rolled over. In fact, it would benefit no one for America to completely pay off its debt, because that debt is a cornerstone of the global financial system. If it were paid off, banks, funds, and pension systems would be pushed into crisis. The money supply would shrink. The economy would freeze. For this reason, government debt exists not to be repaid, but to be continuously renewed, to keep this cycle going. However, there is an injustice, an unfairness here. Interest payments are not distributed equally. Money generally flows from the bottom upward, from taxpayers to those who hold the debt. So debt is not only a transfer between countries, but also between social classes. That is why we can say that as debt increases, inequality increases as well. It makes little sense to look for a single culprit, not China, not the IMF, not Wall Street alone. We are all in this system together. Debt was once something like slavery. At the point we have reached, it looks like balance. But if that balance is lost, if trust is shaken, then we remember what debt really is, a promise that cannot be held forever.